Hello and welcome to the Star Wars Universe podcast. Today, myself and Jeff Randall are discussing the heartbreaking work of cinematic genius that is known as Attack of the Clones. And while I'm being perhaps a tad sarcastic, we are actually today going to find some of the good things in this movie that we liked, as well as maybe talk about some parts that we were not so happy with, and just generally talk about where it fits in the overall story. All that and more after this ad break we have no control over. Welcome back. My name is Matthew Westfox. I'm one of your hosts. I am joined today, as I am for all of these discussions of the movies, Jeff Randall. Jeff, how are we doing today?
Sir, I'm hurting.
It's a little bit early in the morning.
No. I mean, yes, it's early in the morning, but this movie hurt me.
Oh, yeah. We're going to hopefully find some of the good parts, as well as maybe talk about how it could have been saved, if only there was a website that could, if only there was a podcast that talked about how to save movies like this.
Yeah, never heard of it.
Overall, I have some very personal feelings that make me think that both Solo and Rise of Skywalker are horrible, horrible movies. But I think just in terms of like movie making skill and putting aside any like what you wanted from it, but just like general quality of dialogue and acting and plotting and plot structure, I think this is the worst Star Wars movie ever made. Are we comfortable saying that?
I would be very comfortable saying that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I looked at it, with the new podcast being about fixing movies and like, seeing what writers have done in the past and like what their other works have been. Like I immediately went into that mode when this movie turned off, and I was like, okay, so, there's a writing problem here, because it was directed by George Lucas, and the Phantom Menace was written and directed by, and we were talking then how you put it in one man's hands who has been immersed in his own mind for 20, 30 years before making this movie, and some things are going to go sideways. And obviously he was like, he took that feedback from the first one and like tried to fix it and got somebody else. Just the person that he got didn't help. So it was directed by George Lucas and written by George Lucas and oh god, I can't remember his name. It doesn't matter, but like yeah. I looked at IMDb, and other than a fan film to fix Attack of the Clones, this was the last thing he worked on as a writer.
Wow. I do wonder overall how many careers were ended because of these movies. I don't think Hayden Christensen did anything ever again. Or
He has. He's done a lot of small under the radar stuff.
Okay. Both Jake Lloyd and the voice of Jar Jar Binks, in part, unfortunately, because they were horribly harassed, which is terrible and fans should not do that. But also I think because they did not show themselves at their best. Yeah. Also had, Jake Lloyd, he was a kid, not really a career to end, but still. There were a lot of technical problems, among other things, with the movies. And we'll talk about them, but I want to talk for a second. This is a terrible segue, but here we go. About a different technical problem, which is an apology to some of you fans. I have been a little sad that I wasn't getting, we love feedback on these shows, and I was always kind of wishing we were getting more feedback. Turns out, actually, a number of you have been emailing in. Gmail had told me that it was forwarding the emails from our Star Wars Universe podcast to my main email, and it wasn't, actually. So on a lark, just to double check it this week, I wound up checking that out, and I found a whole bunch of back emails. So there's a little off topic from Phantom Menace, but it's on the topic of things that Jeff and I, or myself and others, have discussed. So I wanted to kind of quickly read one or two of these so that Jeff, you and I can respond to them, because this is awesome that our fans have been writing into us. And the first one is directly referencing, Jeff, a conversation you and I had at the end of our webcast about The Mandalorian.
The Darksaber.
Yes. And this comes from Marlon Marlon, I'm so sorry, I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Marlon Gonsalves. So he says, G'day.
Gonsalves?
I'm guessing... No, it's Gonsalves. Gonsalves.
That's probably Gonsalves.
I should have actually sent this to you, Jeff, because as listeners to Jeff's other podcast know, he loves reading things in accents.
I'm a reader.
And he starts with the word "g'day," which makes me think he might be Australian. But just in case, we're going to push through. Thanks for a brilliant podcast on one of the best Star Wars shows ever made. The Mandalorian is brilliant, and your podcast was the perfect companion to the series. I actually listened to the final episode of your Mando podcast twice because I couldn't believe you didn't pick up on Moff Gideon not wielding the Darksaber. For someone who's so engaged in the Clone Wars, not recognizing the Darksaber is akin to someone from the MCU not realizing Mjolnir lying in a field. I know that's hitting deep.
How dare you?
The ramifications that Moff Gideon has the Darksaber is just as important as Mando finding a clan of enemy wizards. Anyway, I could be completely wrong. It gives us a great smiley face. But I'd be happy to learn why I'm so wrong. Looking forward to seeing what you do next across the Stranded Panda Network. Thank you for being such brilliant content and a much-needed distraction from reality. Cheers, one more Stranded, and then he has a great emoji of a panda.
Nice.
Yeah. So,
Marlon,
thank you so much for writing in. This is the kind of stuff I think that we as creators really love. Jeff, I know you love talking about it on your other podcasts. And what I want to just say is thank you so much for letting us know about something. I think important context here, Jeff has himself not watched the Clone Wars yet. And I watched it probably 8 years ago. And funnily enough, I read this email, and then like a day or two later, I got to those episodes again in the Clone Wars where this comes up. So I definitely had a kind of dough moment.
You're saying that you haven't, like, you're not watching the Clone Wars literally every day, all day?
I know. It's kind of hard. And it leads to a point that I wanted to make. And because we did get this great email from Marlon, we also had an email from someone else who I think, again, really wants us to be the best podcast we can be, but was honestly a little bit more critical of us for not knowing it. And I wanted to kind of just take this as an opportunity to say, and Jeff, let me know where you stand. But for me, this podcast is about my love of Star Wars and is about my wanting to share that love with other people who love it. And I think one of the things that can happen in fandoms is this idea that to be a fan or even to talk about something, you have to have committed to memory all of the different content. And I think that's kind of a problem sometimes with any cast, like even with the MCU. But I can understand why if someone's like, it's referenced in one movie, people should know about it the other movies. And I can understand that, though I would still say, like, I don't think you have to have a perfect memory to be a fan. But I think for Star Wars especially, we have kind of different levels of content. We have all of the movies, which are great. And frankly, a lot of fans, that's all they've done, is they've seen the movies and they're comfortable with that. And I think you're still a fantastic fan if that's all you've done. Or you've seen one or two of the shows, but you haven't seen all of them yet. Or like me, you have seen quite a lot of it. I'm in the process of watching Rebels and Rebellion now. I haven't finished them yet. But I have not committed this all to memory. And that's just a thing I want to be frank about. And so I kind of wanted to take this time to say, please, when we get stuff wrong, let us know. Remind us. That's great. That's what this conversation should be about. But understand that if what you're looking for from a Star Wars podcast is two hosts who have that kind of encyclopedic knowledge going in and can make sure that we're always being perfect about everything, this may not be the podcast for you. Because I think we are both, big fans. I'm going to, Jeff, you often dig deep on stuff and do research, which I think is fantastic. And we're going to try and do that. But we're not going to get everything. And especially when it's stuff from shows that we may not have seen or that we saw quite a while ago, some of that stuff should be maybe missed. Especially because, and this is kind of a different comment, I love Easter eggs. But I do think it's fair to say that if there's a major plot point in a show that you only know if you've seen something totally different, that's not often I don't think you should expect everyone who watches something to know what it means. In this case, I don't think that's happening because I think you go, as you and I clearly did, just as much enjoy The Mandalorian without having seen it, but without knowing it's the Darksaber. But I do think that's just an important general reminder about, you know, how sometimes imagining that we have all that information can become gatekeeping. And so it's just something to be a little bit careful of, and I want people to know about us. But this is to me is the perfect way to write in and say, you know, hey, there's something you missed. So Marlon, thank you so much for letting us know that. We're going to miss other stuff, but please keep writing us in, and we will keep trying to have our encyclopedic knowledge as best as it can be.
Nah. I'm just going to preface every episode with, I haven't seen any of the Clone Wars series.
And I think that's very fair. I think it does a lot of great world building, but I think it's also fair to say, you know, what it doesn't feel, you know, that not everyone can be expected to have seen it.
Well, like, I tried to watch. Okay, so I can't say that I haven't seen any of it. I saw maybe 6 episodes. I remember the episode with Plo Koon in space not needing to breathe as much. And like, that was weird. But like, he was floating around saving some troopers. Like, it was it was early season, so you know, obviously it's a little bit of a grind to get through it, and you can see the potential in a lot of shows in the first season, but like, this one just did not sit with me, and I was like, I'm probably not going to come back to this.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think as we've been talking about on the other side of the podcast, we're getting into the Clone Wars. I think the show has an awful lot of brilliance to it, especially in later seasons. The first season is very rough, and people who watch the first season and never get past it, I cannot blame them. So I totally understand that.
Yeah, I kept looking at the total episode count for season 1 and was like, God, there's so many. Why?
Yeah. Now, most of the all the other feedback we've gotten so far is about except there's one that I'm going to read on air later today. Most of the feedback we've gotten so far has been about the Clone Wars, and so I will read that next week when we do our next episode on the Clone Wars with Riki and Sarah. But just again, to the fans, thank you so much for writing in. Even when you're critical of us, this is great. This is how we learn. This is how we grow. And so many of you wrote in being so supportive and talking about why you love the show. Not to the podcast, but why you love Star Wars and the stuff we're talking about. Please keep doing it. That's fantastic. It's part of the conversation, and we'll always happily read what you have to say right here on air. So, with all that, Jeff, let's get back to our discussion of the Clone Wars.
Yeah, circle back.
Yeah. And so we were, you know, we'd done kind of a general introduction, and I thought that was a nice thing to throw in the middle. And now let's, we're going to have an actual structure, because it's going to help us not just spend 2 hours bashing on the Clone Wars, because, like I said, I think there's the seeds of what could have been a much better movie in here, and there's some scenes that I think people can appreciate.
Speaking of an actual structure, I think that may have helped this movie.
That might have been a good idea. So, all right, well, given that, Jeff, do you want to give a brief plot summary?
No.
Okay, let me see if I can do it to the best of my abilities, and please fill me in on where I'm wrong.
I'm just going to be so mad if I have to recount this plot.
That's very fair. So, we open with the idea that we again have the scroll that comes over, and the scroll tells us that there is a crisis in the Republic, that there's a lot of systems that want to separate from the Republic, and everybody's very nervous about it. Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it? They never tell us why. Dooku a little bit does later.
Who?
Well, we don't know yet. In the fan scroll, it also introduces us to the idea that there's this person named Count Dooku, it describes him in the general purple language of a scroll as mysterious and, you know, I think it's enigmatic or something like that. I don't remember exact words. But basically it's saying, like, you know, hey, we're, be nervous about Dooku, be nervous about the Separatists, they're bad, and that Queen Amidala is in mortal danger. And Queen Amidala, also that she's rushing back to the, give me 1 second. I'm going to actually read this damn thing.
I remember, like, I read it out loud with the kids, and I stopped several times throughout it just going, why?
Yeah.
Who?
I think that's very true. So actually, reading it all out, there's unrest in the Galactic Senate. Several thousand solar systems have declared their intentions to leave the Republic. The Separatist movement, under the leadership of the mysterious Count Dooku, has made it difficult for the limited number of Jedi Knights to maintain peace and order in the galaxy. Again, why? Senator Amidala, the former Queen of Naboo, is returning to the Galactic Senate to vote on the critical issue of creating an army of the Republic to assist the overwhelmed Jedi. We'll get to all that in a second, I promise. Let's just finish, though, with the plot summary. So, Queen Amidala comes back. They attempt to assassinate her. It doesn't go well, but one of her body doubles dies. Not sure why she still has body doubles, since I think at this point the word is just cannon fodder. But there you go.
Who signs up to do that?
Yeah, the Jedi decide that she must be protected, although they still don't know what's going on. And so they assign Anakin and Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan meets her and is super, super creepy, and she's pretty creeped out. The two of them again have to save her, and this time they go on an epic fight, a journey through the streets of Coruscant. It is an attempt to be Fast and Furious Coruscant edition that really doesn't work. But at the end of which they find that the person they've been chasing this whole time is a changeling, who is just about to confess what happened when they are killed, and they are killed by a mysterious Mandalorian who flies away. So, more discussion about what's going on, people are more concerned, and now at this point, they decide that we have to split up, and Obi-Wan has to try and investigate what happened to the person who tried to kill Amidala, and what's going on with the bounty hunter, while Anakin is going to go off with Amidala to try and hide and keep her safe, because keeping her safe is very important. And again, we're talking more about the Separatists and how they're getting closer to separating, and that we're getting closer to passing the Army of the Republic, both of which are bad for reasons that are never explained. Excuse me. All sorts of problems so far. But then, so Obi-Wan can tell that Anakin has strong feelings for Padme, and that he's basically crushing on her pretty hard. So he says, remember, be careful of your feelings, don't do anything stupid, just go off and have this complete rom-com in the most romantic possible settings you can have with her, as the two of you go off into rom-com land. More great planning by Obi-Wan. So Obi-Wan goes and searches to try and figure out what happened to everything that's going on with Padme and being assassinated. The dart leads him to a space diner, where there is a diner on Coruscant where the fry cook is also incredibly knowledgeable about things that the Jedi don't know about. Okay, sure. He tells him that the dart that he found leads him to Kamino, who are the cloners. Obi-Wan goes off to try and... I'm going to just kind of do each plot line, and then we'll circle back.
Yep.
Obi-Wan goes off to try and learn about the cloners. The cloners tell him that, we're so glad you're here, because this mysterious guy named Sifo-Dyas, who's also a Jedi, came and tried to get more clones, tried to order a whole army of clones 10 years ago, all based on this Mandalorian bounty hunter named Jango Fett. And they've spent 10 years building this army, training them, doing all kinds of crazy things. They think that Obi-Wan is a part of Sifo-Dyas' plan, because he's also a Jedi, even though nothing Obi-Wan does indicates that he has any idea what's going on. The Kaminoans, I think I could go up to them and say, hey, my name is Jeff Randall. I forgot my account number. Can you please remind me of the credit card number that me, Jeff Randall, used? And they would happily give me your credit card number. Their account security is real bad.
They didn't do any two-factor authentication at all. Right?
Like Obi-Wan never gets a text to his phone saying, let's make sure you're still working with Sifo-Dyas. But anyway, he meets Jango Fett. He feels suspicious. He makes some incredible leaps of logic without being backed up by anything. That this is the same guy who he saw in Coruscant. There's tension. They fight. Eventually, Jango Fett leaves, and Obi-Wan chases him and tries to shoot him down. Again, not quite sure why. If you want to learn information from him, to blowing up his ship, maybe not the best idea. Well, actually, guys, that's wrong. He's chasing Jango Fett. Jango Fett's trying to destroy him. Fair enough. Jango Fett, by the way, has made his own clone, who's not having any kind of accelerated process and does not have his aggression and desire to rebel taken away, and that clone is his son, who he's named Boba. So hence Boba Fett we have, who's a very charming little psychotic 10-year-old. Sociopath. Yeah, I don't mean
to
imply a mental illness that I should not have said, but more just, he's pretty clear, happily like, yeah, Dad, go kill that Jedi. Charming child.
Blow him up, Dad.
So Jango Fett leads them to Geonosis. Obi-Wan reports that he's on Geonosis to the Jedi and says that they're building an army of clones and that the Separatist leaders are all here, at which point Obi-Wan is taken prisoner. We then have what I think was potentially my favorite scene of the movie and where I thought the movie could really go in a good direction. Obi-Wan we finally meet Count Dooku. I think we actually met him a little before when he was talking to Separatist leaders, but now we really get to talk to him. And he starts out talking to Obi-Wan about why he thinks Obi-Wan should actually join the Separatists. And he makes some pretty legitimate points about how the Republic is totally corrupt and about how the Jedi have lost their way and all this stuff. And Obi-Wan is just no interest in listening to him. Like, no, Dooku, you're bad. You're wrong. And then Dooku kind of shows, okay, well, all my stuff about how I hope I can free you is kind of bullshit. I'm going to, help you get killed. Fair enough.
I want to point out that this first meeting with Dooku happens about an hour and a half into the movie.
Yep. The meeting that kind of sets up what is happening with the Separatists entirely.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're going to get to that. I promise. So meanwhile, Anakin and Padme kiss, and then they decide that they should not kiss. And so instead they go on to, as I've said, every rom-com romantic setting you could possibly have. Do everything they can to kindle the flames of romance that they're supposed to be fighting. Anakin is a total fuckboy. He really should be wearing a fedora through all of this.
A trilby. Don't sully the name of fedora. It's a trilby.
Hey, listen. Okay, yeah, no, he should be wearing that all the time. He does, though, call her Milady, which makes me wonder if this is where the Milady fuckboy trope actually comes from. I'm not sure. But
it might be.
He romances her. He is terrible. He uses the most oft-quoted, most terrible line in all of cinema. I don't like sand. Etc. We won't make your ears bleed with that. At some point during this, he realizes that his mother's in danger. He flies back to Tatooine. He meets up with Lars and with who will be Aunt Beru, who's now his girlfriend, and his father, Uncle. So he meets with Lars, who is his stepfather now, and then his stepbrother Owen and his girlfriend Beru. Realizes that his mother has been sold to this guy Lars, but Lars then freed her and married her. That's not creepy in the slightest. We'll just call him Thomas Jefferson from now on.
No, it's fine.
But he then realizes that the Sand People are the ones who have kidnapped his mother and left her almost dead, but just alive enough that she can stay alive to very conveniently die in his arms just as he arrives. He goes into a murderous rage, and as he later says to Padme, kills all the Sand People, including the women and children. And we'll get to the language he uses, and we hear the dark side music playing because we are being incredibly unsubtle about the fact that this is his path to the dark side. Fine. Him and Padme this whole time has been telling him, like, Anakin, you have to stop rushing into things, you have to stay here and help protect me, etc. Padme now gets the message from Obi-Wan, they both do, saying that Obi-Wan's in trouble on Geonosis, and that none of the Jedi are close by and able to help. And Padme now is the one to say, no, we've got to go help Obi-Wan, even though Anakin's trying not to be rash. So she says, I'm going to go, you have to come with me to protect me. They get to Geonosis, they get stuck in a droid factory. Ridiculous hijinks ensue, including C-3PO's head in a scene that we'll definitely talk about. Anakin and Padme get captured as well. They're going to be murdered by the Geonosians in a ritual combat against, not even combat, they're chained to posts, and they're supposed to have these huge space monsters kill them. The huge space monsters come in, but our friends win the fight. They get themselves free. Everyone's super unhappy, and especially the Neomodians from last season, who still hate Senator Amidala for no discernible reason other than being mad about their plans about Naboo. Fair enough. So they're going to have them all killed when by droids, when here come the Jedi to come to the rescue. The Jedi come to the rescue. We get epic battle scenes between the Jedi. Some Jedi are killed. We see that Jango Fett's kind of badass always. Mace Windu gets to be even more badass. He kills Jango Fett. Bobo picks up the severed head Boba, sorry. I'm trying to do this fast. I'm going way too slow. Boba picks up the severed head of his father. So now we really need this child to see a psychologist about childhood trauma. But, and when it seems like the Jedi are going to win, lots more clones are released. The Jedi are now losing. The Jedi are about to die. And now here comes Yoda with the Army of the Republic, which is all clones. Yoda very proudly brings in the Army of the Republic. He had said earlier that he was troubled by this, but he should go and investigate. Now he's happily the general. He's bringing them all in. We get an epic kind of land battle between the forces of the Republic, the clones, and the forces of the droids, and there's lots of explosions and tanks and total lack of coherence about what's going on. Meanwhile, Anakin and Obi-Wan are chasing Count Dooku, trying to stop him once and for all. Padme falls out of the ship, and Anakin is insistent that they go back and save her, and Obi-Wan is like, no, you've got to keep your focus on the mission. This is the whole point. You're losing your focus. You're too focused on her. They go back and forth far too many times for it to make any sense. But eventually they get to Count Dooku. Obi-Wan says, of course, we'll fight him together. Anakin's like, nah, bro, I got this. Rushes in, gets, I think, the first of the many, many, many Jedi getting their hand cut off starts now. Because Anakin gets his hand cut off by Dooku.
Not immediately.
Say again?
Not immediately. First thing he gets is lightninged.
Yes, no, he gets lightninged, which again we're supposed to maybe Dooku is Sith. We're not sure. But it's certainly been the whole time he's talking about. He's revealing the secret that there's this Sith Lord at the head of the Republic, and the Jedi. So, not the Jedi, just the Republic. So they fight. Obi-Wan is also defeated. Obi-Wan and Anakin are sent off into a corner by Dooku to cuddle. Nice reminder. These two have a nice, touching relationship. All the fan shippers get great content from that. Good for them. Yoda comes in. Yoda and Dooku have a fight in which, for the first time, we reveal that Yoda actually is not disabled in the slightest. He doesn't need the cane, and he's a magical bouncing Muppet who can do crazy lightsaber things that make no sense.
He's an Atari master. It's fine.
Exactly. They have a fight. I've got it. For a minute, I really wanted to quote Particle Man by TMBG. They have a fight. Dooku wins. Particle Man. Anyway, I'm loopy. I'm sorry. I'm just about done, I promise. Dooku escapes, and then we get to what is probably my least favorite scene in all of Star Wars, and I'll discuss why in a bit. It is revealed that Dark Dooku has been working with Count Sidious this whole time. It's all a terrible plot just to create this big war to manipulate the Jedi and the Republic. And then we cut to a scene of a secret wedding in Naboo, where Anakin and Padme are getting married. She, by the way, had declared her love, that she has loved Anakin all this time, because, babysitters always love the kids that they babysat. And now they get married, and then we roll credits.
God.
What did I miss?
All
right.
You missed a good movie somewhere.
Yeah. And again, get me on your podcast, Movie Medics, because as I was watching it again this time, I was really thinking about all the ways this could have been made a much better movie. But let's go through our normal structure and
I don't think we're ready
and try
for this.
to, I know a lot of fans do like this movie, and one actually wrote into us, and that's what I'm going to, I'll quote her in a little bit. But let's just kind of go. So, general thoughts on the movie.
So
it sounds like you're not a fan.
When I was watching it, when I first watched it way back when it first came out, 2002, I was still in high school, and I was like, yeah, it's fine. It's a sci-fi movie. It's whatever. And if I'm being honest, at the time, I was probably also a fuckboy. So
yeah, that's fair.
Watching that happen on screen, I was like, yeah. You just stick around long enough and a lady will come to you. She'll come around.
For anybody who ever wondered, I got the same lessons, but for me it was Bill Murray in Ghostbusters being a complete stalker and then getting the girl, and I was a shitty guy for a while. Not because of these movies, but yeah, these movies reinforce shitty ideas and people do shitty things because of them. Doesn't excuse it, but anyway, go on. But yeah, I'm glad you can name that.
So this time watching it, I was just appalled at the like the pacing of the movie was way bad, way wrong. The dialogue in it was absurd, and it's like, I don't know. It feels like at the beginning, George Lucas, like, he made some shots and he rolled some footage and was like, well, we can't throw that away. We recorded it. Like, we have to include all of it, right? And like there could have been much tighter editing in this movie to like not only to like kind of rein in the rampant weird looks, but also the just the length of the movie. It did not need to be like, for what was presented on screen. 2.5 hours is absurd.
Yeah, there were so many scenes that could have been cut. I thought so much of that. I in terms of things I liked, and we'll get more of that in a second. I liked the Jedi battle. I liked the battle on Geonosis. I thought some of it could be a lot better. The Jedi part of it, I thought, basically getting us into land war between the two armies. One or two of those scenes were interesting. It just went on so long. Yeah. And then there were just so many, there were so many things about it that, to me, that was 100% about getting kids to watch the Clone Wars and getting to sell toys. And like, George Lucas was the original king of cinematic merchandising. That's part of how he made so much money, is he convinced the producers of the people who gave him the money for Star Wars, to allow him to keep all the rights for merchandising, because no one had really ever thought about that. And then he made millions and millions of dollars selling all those toys. And it seemed to me like, if nothing else, like, just so much of this was meant to help sell more toys. Because you're right, there were so many scenes that we didn't need. There was so many like pondering scenes that just went so slow. Yeah.
Well, not only that, but like, not just scenes that we didn't need, but also like scenes that went on just a second or 5 too long. Yeah. And like, just trim that shit. Just trim the fat. Bring it in. And, there were like, on the, thinking about it, when the ridiculous death happened of the double for Amidala, when she's laying flat on the ground and then has to indicate that she has died, and she like throws her head to the side, like,
Yeah.
That was the first time I laughed out loud during this movie. And oh my God, when things like that are going on and the dialogue is just like, there's a line, couple of beats, there's another line, like, tighten that shit up, man. Trim it. We don't need all that. But part of the problem with it is that every scene, like, if you go back and look at it, like, we don't spend any more than about maybe 20 seconds tops, 20, 30 seconds in each scene before there's a wipe and we go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. We don't let the scenes breathe. Now, I guess that's the way that you try to break up shoddy penmanship, shoddy with screenwriting, dialogue. But you can't. Okay, shitty dialogue in the movie is not going to be fixed by faster editing. You just need to write better. Yeah. And it was Jonathan Hales was the other screenwriter whose career ended after this movie.
Probably well deserved. Things like I mentioned with the scene between Obi-Wan and Anakin. Like, to me, one of the things about good filmmaking is that you don't get repetitive. And here there is an extent to which, like, I think it's great when movies really highlight what real life is like. But one of the things, and I know this, like, I've been a relationship therapist, and I've been in a lot of relationships that needed a lot of therapy. And that part of the thing about is that when people fight, it can be tedious sometimes because people just keep repeating the same things again and again. And that's not, sometimes when the real focus is the relationship, you can make that good by building the tension. But you really otherwise shouldn't be doing that. And to me, the Anakin and Obi-Wan arguing while they're at the end about whether to save Padme is the perfect example. We established that Anakin really wants to save Padme. We establish that Obi-Wan thinks that, no, like, Padme is important, but she's just one person. If we stop Dooku, we can prevent this war that will kill millions, if not billions, for reasons we don't understand. And then Anakin one more time says, like, you know, I don't want this. And then Obi-Wan, you know, is like, well, doesn't matter. We're doing it. That's all you need. Like, you didn't need... It felt like it was 10 minutes. I'm sure it was not that. I'm sure maybe it was only 90 seconds. But it just felt like we had way too much of those two going back and forth. And I felt like there was so much of that. You know, like, we established early on that Obi-Wan doesn't have any idea what's happening with the Kaminoans and why they're making the clones. And then they reestablish that with like 3 or 4 other moments as it goes on. It felt like there were so many times where George Lucas didn't trust his own audience. Didn't trust, and I think maybe this is part of the, like, we're writing it for kids thing. But even, like, I mean, you and me are both huge fans of a kids show, Avatar the Airbender. You know, I know people who loved that when they were 8 years old, 10 years old. It is very subtle, but it trusts its audience, even the young ones, to get the subtlety. And I feel like this movie just doesn't have that at all. There's no subtlety. Everything has to be hitting you over the head, and everything suffers because of it.
Well, to point out the differences with Avatar: The Last Airbender versus this, Avatar: The Last Airbender was a serialized television show. Mm-hmm. Every episode where something from the past was going to come back, they did it previously on Avatar. Well, I mean, they did it previously on Avatar anyway, but you could tell what the focus of the upcoming episode was going to be based on what the previously on Avatar said.
Right.
So... But like that is kind of where we get to trust the audience, in that, you know, they get the gentle reminders every now and again that this is coming back. You know, the 2.5 hour movie, if you're expecting kids to pay attention for that long, you're out of your freaking mind, first off.
That's fair. But I mean, even within scenes, like the, you know, stuff with like I don't want to do any spoils for Avatar, but I feel like there was a lot of specific moments within it where they establish a particular feeling with one specific moment, and they don't need to repeat it 3 times in the next 30 seconds, you know?
Right. Yeah.
That's the subtlety.
Katara, how you feeling? Katara, how you feeling? Katara, how you feeling?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not that. It's Katara, how you feeling? And then she says it, and then they move on.
Yeah. So let me, and I've hinted at it, but I want to just dive into what is my main complaint about the movie, and and it's also kind of what would be the basis of how I'd rewrite it. And it's because, like I said, this whole time we never quite understand why the Separatists are doing what they're doing. And especially we don't understand why the implication is that this will lead to huge galactic war. Because frankly, like, if a whole bunch of people separate and the Republic is like, sure, don't let the door hit your ass on the way out, then you just now have 2 separate republics, or 2 separate, you know, intergalactic or, you know, interplanetary, whatever it is, institutions. And we keep hearing this talk about how the Jedi, it's harder for the Jedi to keep peace because this is happening. We never know why. We keep hearing that, like, the Separatists are bad and evil. We never know why. And I like the idea of the narrator maybe being unreliable, that maybe the scroll even is not perfect. And so when Dooku comes in and makes the case to Obi-Wan, I had this huge glimmer of hope get started. And my hope was that maybe now Lucas got it, that maybe now we were getting back to some of the subtlety that's supposed to be at the heart and soul of the Sith, you know, that they manipulate people, and that manipulate people, like, the best way of manipulating people is getting them to do something that they think they're doing in their own best interest, and they think they're doing for the right reasons, because they don't realize that you've convinced them to do it for your own nefarious purposes. And
right,
so,
like giving over full power to the Supreme Chancellor.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like, Jar Jar Binks is so painful, and I wish it hadn't been him. But, like, what Palpatine does there is brilliant, because he manipulates them into giving him this power, acting like he doesn't want it, and they all have no idea they're helping him. So, to me, when Dooku comes in and says, why are the Separatists separating? It's because we think the Republic is corrupt and ineffectual, which we've seen proof of. Frankly, again, I wish the people of Naboo were solidly on the Separatist side. given that, the Republic was totally unhelpful, because he thinks the Jedi are being corrupted and being, led astray by their own arrogance, something we've definitely seen in the movie. There's a couple of great lines where at one point Obi-Wan is looking for his lost planet, and he says, well, but if it's not in the Jedi records, it must not exist. And another point, he's talking about Sifo Dyas, and he's saying, he's talking about Dooku, actually, and he says, Dooku couldn't be an assassin. He was a Jedi. There's just so much hubris about what the Jedi are.
Mace Windu says that.
Yes, Mace Windu says that. You're right. And so, and so Dooku's saying, no, the Jedi have lost their way. They're arrogant. They've become, corrupt and terrible. And by the way, there's a Dark Lord of the Sith at the heart of the Republic. I was like, oh my God, Dooku's going to be one of our heroes. He gets it. He understands. And now I thought we were going to have this movie about how, people like Obi-Wan and Anakin and some of the rest of the Jedi were going to kind of realize the problems, and we start to have this great conflict. And because the whole time, Dooku, or maybe even if Anakin and Obi-Wan never go with him because they're still locked in that Jedi mentality, at least we know that Dooku is this tragic figure who thinks he's doing the right thing, but it's all because of Palpatine's machinations. That would have been, I would have forgiven all the bad romance if we'd gotten that plot. Because that makes it make so much more sense and makes Palpatine's whole plot look so much more sinister. And the whole thing seems so much more tragic and ironic. And so that moment when Dooku walks in and meets Sidious, I literally groaned out loud in the theater. I think I said something like, oh, come on. And I got a number of dirty looks from people around me in the theater. I was young. I apologize as well. But yeah, so to me, that's my biggest thought on this movie, is that I think that's where it really lost me entirely. There was so much that was bad, but I just kept holding out hope that we were going to get, that this was going to be the movie that had more subtlety than the first one. And when we got that, I was just like, I'm done. I can't believe you're doing us this dirty, Lucas.
Yep. Well, remind me, what were the time jumps in between A New Hope and Empire? And Empire and Jedi.
In terms of production years, or in terms of years in story?
Years in story.
So I looked this up before. I believe it's about 3 to 4 years in each time.
Okay.
So let's just go through the whole thing. So the original Phantom Menace is set 32 years before the Battle of Yavin. This movie is set 22 years, so 10 years later. Clone Wars all then happen within 20. So the Clone Wars take 3 years total. Revenge of the Sith happens in 19 before the Battle of Yavin. So we now know that Luke Skywalker was 18 to 19 years old. No, 19 years old, because he's born during that last movie. So Rogue One happens in year 0. A New Hope happens in year 0 of Battle Before Yavin. Empire Strikes Back happens 3 years later, 3 years ABY after the Battle of Yavin. And Return of the Jedi happens a year later. So we have a 3-year gap between New Hope and Empire, and then a 1-year gap between Empire and Return of the Jedi.
Okay. So 3 and 1 years in between them. And no character has a major change in their life by growing up, moving from child to young adult, or child to adult, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. None of our major characters shift like that in that time frame. Yeah,
Luke has a big sort of epiphany. Luke becomes a Jedi. I think his Jedi training happens mostly off screen between movies 2 and 3. But you're right. He's still basically the same person.
Right. So I think where this movie suffers a lot is that 10-year gap between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
Where we're supposed to believe that Anakin has grown up under the tutelage of Obi-Wan and has been stubborn and been prideful this entire time, and the Separatists have become a thing and want to separate from the Galactic Senate. All of these things are stories that could have been told, that we could have seen happen. And I think that, as we've been talking about it, I was like, there's actually, in this movie, there are two distinct storylines that are pretty big that they seem like they're different, but they tie together at the end, or at least they can. We've got the Galactic Senate and the Separatists. They're doing their thing, and the political machinations of the Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. But you've also got the Jedi doing their thing, and and the way that they're dealing with Dooku, and Dooku, being a former Jedi. He used to be a Jedi. That's not in his nature. And maybe maybe Dooku saw all of the not diplomacy, all of the bureaucracy that was bullshit in the Jedi Order, and had to get out of it and do things his own way because he's more of a Wolverine than a Cyclops. Anything like that could have been going on with that plot line. And these two stories are big enough to where they could be their own movies. We probably could have had a separate trilogy. We could have had a trilogy of Anakin growing up. We could have had a trilogy of the Senate and that whole thing tying in with a separate trilogy. Well, I would say the trilogy of Anakin growing up could also be finding out that the bureaucracy in the Jedi Order is garbage. So we could have had those two things happening, maybe simultaneously. I don't know. George Lucas is not really that visionary anymore. he kind of lost it, but we could have had those two stories happening at the same time. Those could have been separate trilogies, and that would have been great and explained. That could have built the world. That could have explained a lot of things that they just kind of expected us to remember from the crawl and just accept. I think that at this point in 2002, audiences are way past just accepting some text on a screen to remember an hour and a half later that, the mysterious Count Dooku, who has just shown up after only being actually spoken word mentioned one other time. And he's our big bad? Are you kidding me? No.
Yeah.
No, Matthew. No. I'm not on board.
Yeah. It just made no sense. And so did you have any of that same hope that I did, that maybe we were going to get an actual interesting subtle plot when Dooku gives that speech to Obi-Wan?
There was that point. I think it was that one actually where it seemed like there was a turn from shitty movie into hey, this could actually be something. And we got something that was hey, this could actually be something for half an hour maybe.
Right.
And then and then it went back into, okay, this is the Clone Wars now. I don't know where this movie came from. It became a Saving Private Ryan in space.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why. I don't know. The whole thing was just all over the place. It was 3 different movies crammed into one, or rather, it wasn't even that it was 3 different movies. It was 3 different types of movies, 3 different genres of film smashed into one.
Yeah. And
in the middle of it was Star Wars with, because the sequence with the giant creatures, that felt like The Mandalorian to me. Having him fight the Mudhorn and, get the egg and all that stuff, that was Mando. But all of this, you've already built up all of this bad faith in the rest of the movie. And you can't just save it with one sequence of this arena battle against monsters and like you had said before, there were some really obvious bad racial what's the word? Racial coding. That was going on in here. And I was a bit uncomfortable with it, but that again, George Lucas, not really the most subtle or best.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so that happened. And I was like, okay, maybe this movie is turning, this could be the positive thing that we want to keep. But then it went back to this other thing entirely. And then with no precedent, we get Yoda Ataru Master. And like if I had, I know about Ataru only because I played
Yeah, I don't know what that word is. Can you explain?
Yeah, it's one of the 7 forms of saber fighting.
Okay.
And Ataru is markedly different from the others in that it is all about acrobatics and putting your opponent off guard by moving a lot and doing a lot of you infuse your muscles with the Force and it allows you to jump and leap and spin and do all the things that Yoda was doing. Qui-Gon Jinn was supposed to be an Ataru master as well, but in the tight spaces that were in the Naboo, or in the place where he was fighting against
Darth Maul.
He couldn't really use his Ataru style very much to any real effect, and that's why he lost.
So let me ask you, because this will get to the heart of one, and it's a minor thing, but it's something that really bothers me. We've seen Yoda through this whole time walk on a cane. Is the idea supposed to be that he's actually perfectly fine the whole time, or that the Force is able to sort of magically help him overcome his being disabled to for a short period of time fight like a master?
That's what it is. It's supposed to be that he infuses his body with the Force, and he can do all of these great things when he needs to in battle, but it does take a toll on your body, and you can see he's winded afterward. And that's what it's supposed to be.
That's a thing that I wish they'd explained, because frankly, and I think many listeners who are listening to my other podcasts may know this, but some may not. I'm disabled myself. I have a prosthetic leg, and I sometimes use a cane and sometimes use a wheelchair. And but that happened to me in my adult life. Even as a kid, I loved Yoda in part because Yoda was someone whose body was not in tip-top shape, whose body was failing him as part of age. But he still was super badass because of the power of his mind and the power of the Force and all that. Mm-hmm. And I felt like when I saw Yoda become magical dancing CGI puppet, all that went away. It was like, he's just as physically badass as all the rest of them. That's kind of a letdown, especially because I just found the scene incredibly boring because he was so fast. Like I didn't get any sense of the drama. It just like boing 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 boing. That's an unpleasant noise. Sorry about that. But yeah, he looked like a pinball. But the point is, I lost that sense. And there's also a trope in general about that you have a disabled character in a show about people with superpowers of some kind, and the superpower allows them to overcome their disability. And it's kind of a trope, and it's not great for portrayal of disabled people. But like, if we'd known that, if we'd heard like someone be like, Yoda, you can do that, and him being like, no, I can't do that normally. Like that's me using the Force, but I'm going to go like be in bed for a week now,
right.
At least then it would have like tied in. Instead, it just erased so much about what happened with him. Anyway, that's a small side note of mine, but yeah, go back to,
I was, the game that I was playing that, made me do the research was Star Wars Destiny, the one with the cards and dice. Really fun game, by the way. Just it has the same chase that Magic has, where like I can't keep up with that, man. I can't afford to keep up with that.
So I will quickly say I'm a very big Magic the Gathering player. I've been involved as a judge and a tournament organizer, and I also used to help run a board game store. And we had tournaments for both Magic the Gathering and Star Wars Destiny. And honestly, the two player bases were Jets and Sharks. We were such rivals with each other. And there was one Saturday where there was one weekend where there was a Star Wars Destiny tournament that was bigger than the Magic tournament that same weekend. And all of us Magic players took it as like a mark of shame. So yeah, I deep down, I know that Destiny is a great game, and I want to learn it sometime. But as a Magic player, I have just like, no. When you're a Planeswalker all the way, from your first white spell to your last whatever. Anyway,
that's funny.
Referencing both board games and card games and musicals, but back to the main point.
It's fine. I think that one of the so I had this the main point that I had been trying to make is that it was very different movies tied in all together. But having the discussion about the Ataru style there makes me think that like if there had been this trilogy of Anakin growing up in the Jedi Order and finding out the bureaucracy was bullshit, like there could have been a lot of discussion of the different styles of saber mastery. Like one of which, like one of the big ones especially, is that Obi-Wan was following the Ataru way up until the events that got Qui-Gon killed. After he watched Qui-Gon die, he changed his saber form and he went to the God, what's it called? The one that's more defensive.
I got no idea.
Hold on. I knew these at one point.
But the next time someone wants to be concerned that Jeff doesn't know the Clone Wars TV show, he knows the video games far better than I do. So, we're trying to get all the knowledge here we can.
It was Soresu. Okay. So after he watched Qui-Gon die, he switched his combat style from Ataru to Soresu. Soresu is very defensive. You let the opponent wear themselves out. It's kind of a rope-a-dope. But you basically, it's all about economy of motion and economy of movement. And you use as little energy as possible in defending yourself while your opponent wears themselves out, and you just take them out when they're, when they've blown all their energy. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense that he, as a Padawan, like he was a young man, just about to get to the point of being a Jedi, watched his master die in and he thought that this guy was an Ataru master, and he saw, maybe this isn't the right thing. Maybe I should get more defensive. And he went ultimate defense. He went that way. And if we had seen like maybe different, styles of saber combat being a thing, then it would have made more sense that him throwing Anakin his lightsaber and Anakin turning on both lightsabers and going like super offensive.
Oh, that'd be so interesting.
That could have been a turn, right? That could have been something, right?
Yeah, and again, there's so much richness there, and I think this kind of gets to a larger point that I think is also true about like who knows what. I think one of the problems that Star Wars really has as an overall franchise is it doesn't really know what is and isn't canon, in terms of like the books, the video games. And like there's been some official declarations, but still it's so muddy and unclear. But yeah, to bring in some of that stuff from the video games would have been I think those video games probably happened after this movie, right?
Which video games?
The ones you're talking about, they start explaining all of the different sword forms and stuff like that, or is that from the books?
I honestly don't know. Okay. I've gotten it from the internet.
Yeah, I mean, but that's again is like there's so many different. I know there's a whole role playing game that goes into a lot of it. That there's just so much. So let's get to we're talking about like different plot arcs here. Normally we talk about this by character. Today I think we're talking more just like story arcs because we're a little all over the place. Because God, this is a bad movie. But
this movie was all over the place.
Let's talk about Padme and Anakin. What's your overall thoughts on this particular story evolution?
There was okay. So I was going to say that there is no story evolution; it just kind of happens. Mm-hmm. But I can markedly, decidedly say that she had no point, no reason to change her mind and decide that she loved this guy. Like you could very clearly see that she was the babysitter, and she knew that she was the babysitter and did not want to get involved with this guy because he creeped her out. But for some reason, the writers decided, let's make her fall in love with him anyway. And I feel like that's such a disservice to Padme Amidala as a character.
Yeah.
And it's really just it's a shame. It's really a shame because she was so strong on her own. She not to point out any internet tropes, but she was a strong, independent woman who didn't need no man.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
No, you jump in.
No, go ahead and finish.
Okay. And having her just be worn down by the relentless advances of some fuckboy is absurd.
Yeah. It's, I don't want to get too deep into social commentary here or anything. And I think that they're like, movies like this don't make people into shitty people. Like when I was kind of a fuckboy, it was because I was a dumb guy making dumb decisions. But
right.
We're shaped by the culture we're in. And I think that movie, like a storyline about a guy who, he's so manipulative is part of the thing. Like there's a scene where, they're having an early conversation. He kisses her. They kind of like, they lean in. I think there's like a moment of tension. And like, she clearly wants to kiss him. But like, he's not like an innocent bystander. He's very much part of this happening. And then she pulls back immediately and is like, we shouldn't have done that. We shouldn't have done that. And what's interesting here is like, she's trying to protect him. Like she on some level, has no reason not to be doing this, but like, she's trying to protect him and his dedication to the Jedi Council and all this kind of stuff. And so later there's a scene when, he basically says like, I have been dying inside every day since that cruel kiss. And he just says that like, she is so cruel to have kissed him once and now not return his love, and that it hurts him so much to be around her. It is just 100% gaslighting, manipulative fuckboy bullshit, Like, forgive me not pulling any punches here, but it made me so angry, especially now watching it now, because like, and the result is like, we watch it as kids and think, yeah, that's how you get the girl. You show her your pain because women are supposed to take care of guys' pain, and just and again, let me pull back from the social commentary of it just to get back to this. You're right. Padme is such a strong character. We see that so much in this movie, and they never give us any possible reason to think why she would fall for him, and why, as we'll later find out, his turning would mean so much to her, like,
mm-hmm.
I kind of would, again, they're never going to do this in a kid's movie, but I kind of would actually have loved it even more if, like the height of like fear and thinking they're going to die, and maybe they have one night together and they fall into bed together, and the next day Padme's like, Jesus, what the hell did I do? That was really stupid.
We shouldn't.
But then that. 2 months later, she's like, by the way, Anakin, that one time we hooked up and I was really dumb, I'm pregnant. What are we going to do? Like that would have made so much more sense. And, what are the Jedi views on abortion? Who knows? Let's find out.
Oh, God.
We're never going to get that movie, of course, but it just, like you said, I think what you said about the 10-year age gap is perfect, because this movie is all tell, no show. They tell us that the Separatists are bad. They never show us. They tell us that Dooku is our enemy. They never show us. They tell us that Padme has actually been in love with Anakin this whole time. But they never show us. And it just makes all of it fall so flat.
Yep. And there's a little bit of social commentary in there as well, in that the main ones that are separating are like the Bankers Guild and the Trade Federation, and all of these, like, all the people that are shown around the table are business people and not senators, not
yes, there's no one who,
not politicians.
Everybody seems to just have a monetary interest.
Right, and they're the ones who are separating from the Republic.
Except also,
why are they even there?
The Neomodians, who also have this like really, really, really intense hatred of Queen Amidala specifically, in a way that like feels like what a 12-year-old boy would do about someone who like, got more votes for him than like, 8th grade class president.
Right.
But like, you tried to take over a planet. She and a whole bunch of Jedi stopped you. Like, okay, like, be mad at her. Maybe you want to kill her later, but like, the whole focus of this movie is the plot to kill her. And she's one of the senators trying to fight the bill to get the Army of the Republic passed, but just one. The hate of her makes no sense. Nothing the Separatists do makes any sense.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're supposed to be on Anakin and Padme.
Sorry.
I'll just say on both of these stories, though, it's one more reason why I would say the Clone Wars is really worth watching if you get a chance. Again, getting past the first season, because we do meet a lot of characters who are Separatists who actually believe in the Separatist cause because they think it's for the best, as well as we do see some genuine chemistry between Anakin and Padme.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm just looking at it. I'm trying to see if there's anything more about Anakin and Padme. That's worth commenting on. I think we can probably just move on.
There's the few times where she decidedly says, "Don't look at me like that. Don't do that. Stop." She repeatedly says, "No, don't do that," and he continues to do that.
Yeah,
and continues to look at her like that.
Yeah,
it made me very uncomfortable.
And especially because, like, you know, we joke about how she's a babysitter to him, kind of, like, she's not actually, but, like, definitely the age difference there is one where it's like, this is kind of creepy if you're into him. But also, like, I mean, in the same way, like, you know, you're not supposed to develop feelings for someone when you're in a professional relationship with them, because it makes things uncomfortable, and it's harassment, it can be, and it, like, because you can't just easily end the professional relationship, and it also creates you know, power imbalances. Okay, so now let's imagine that your life has been threatened many times. You've come very close to death on 2 different occasions, just in this one movie. And the person who is now sworn to defend you, who's your only option to stay alive if you get attacked again, has now told you he's very mad at you for not wanting to kiss him back. That's not any, like, mixed, like, that's not any kind of, like, additional pressure to be added into the situation.
Yeah, that's not fair to her in the slightest. Like, from Anakin's point of view, or even the frickin' writers. Why even attempt assassination on her?
Yeah, it doesn't. So much of it. Let's go to Anakin, though, because I do think that the Anakin plotline is actually a pretty good one. Even if, again, it's handled very non-subtly. What's your take on kind of Anakin? I guess it's mostly the Anakin and Tatooine story.
Anakin on Tatooine. I mean, having him... Okay. Man, I would really like to have seen Anakin going back to Tatooine in movie 3. Of his arc of being in the Jedi Order, and maybe he's getting, you know, feelings of you know, the bureaucracy is garbage, and maybe I need to step away for a minute, because now, like, we've heard. Sorry, I've got a lot of mixed thoughts on this. So we've heard in this movie that Dooku used to be a Jedi. We have at no point in prior canon ever heard about somebody who used to be a Jedi who is not now Sith.
Yep.
You either Jedi until you die, or you turn dark and become a Sith. So having Dooku used to be a Jedi, if he had gone not Sith, or if he just stepped away to be a different kind of good force, and maybe, like, reached out to Anakin because he saw, you know, he had heard about Anakin having trouble and struggling, and was like, you know what, maybe this will be another guy on my side. And then we got a third faction in here, a growing, I don't know, gray Jedi sect. Maybe Anakin is going toward that direction and being told, you know what, maybe embrace your feelings, but don't take it to a dark place. And he's encouraged to go to Tatooine, and then goes to Tatooine and finds that, you know, that his mom is captured in, you know, by the Tusken Raiders, who have never been seen take a prisoner so far in canon, but apparently they do. That's that notwithstanding. If he found his mom and that drove him to a dark place, and, you know, maybe Dooku has to live with that kind of that shame. And oh man, you know what would be freaking awesome?
Tell me.
Is if in Revenge of the Sith, when it's Obi-Wan and damn it, Obi-Wan and Anakin are fighting in the lava factory, whatever. When they're having their fight, and he's like, I loved you like a brother, and, like, you can't go down this dark path. What if it had been Obi-Wan and Anakin, and Dooku, and all three of them are fighting each other. Because Dooku is trying to say, like, you shouldn't have gone that far. Obi-Wan is mad at Dooku for taking him out of the Jedi Order, but also trying to stop Anakin. Anakin's mad at both of them because neither of his teachers understand him and the pain that he's going through. All three of them fighting each other might have been a real, like, not only could it have been really cool choreography, but that would have been awesome story.
Yeah, that could have been so good. And you could do it that way. You know, like, for me, I think another way of doing it is if Dooku becomes much, like you said, much more of a main character. Like, what if he was introduced in Episode 1? You know, and what if he was the guy on the Jedi Council who was sort of saying, like, you know, who's kind of pushing them to be more concerned about things, and no one was listening to him, you know? And so by this movie, we hear he's left, and you're right, there's some talk about, like, but Jedi never leave. Or there's talk of, like, well, you know, remember Jedi, you know, Happy Pants left, you know, 10 years ago, and he's fine, just doing his own thing.
He retired.
Yeah, like, give us some context, because you're right, we don't know where they fit. And I will say that the TV show Clone Wars makes references in other occasions to other Jedi leaving. And there's one character who says that he at one point was very tempted to almost leave. But we never get a sense that that's about being Sith. It's about just like, I wanted to, you know, kind of like, you know, Maria from Sound of Music. I fell in love, so I wanted to leave the Order. Like that's, and I think there's kind of I think at one point like that said to Anakin, like, if you want to love her, you have to leave the Order. But yeah, it doesn't mean Sith.
And that's never established that that's an option.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think that could have been such an interesting thing, especially because, like, to me, in so many ways, once you establish Dooku, then now a lot of the story should be the fall of Dooku, you know? And this actually, I think, gets back to what you were talking about how this is kind of two different movies. I still am kind of the idea of, what if you had this movie without Anakin Skywalker at all? You know, what if this trilogy was really about the fall of the Republic, the fall of the Jedi, and the fall of Count Dooku? You know, and that, like, Count Dooku becoming a Sith through, like, the subtle machinations of Palpatine. You know, you can still do that with Anakin too, but I just keep getting frustrated as we go down different plot lines. So let me pull this back to Anakin himself, actually, and that's entirely my tangent. I think you're right. Sorry. I think this would have made more sense in movie 3, but I do think it works here. I think it's I would say it works for Anakin. It makes me feel like how there's forget all the fuckboy stuff. Once Anakin says, I slaughtered the children because they're animals and I hate them.
I slaughtered them like animals.
Yeah, well, he says, I slaughtered like the animals because that's what they are. They're animals and I hate them. The exact words is, I killed them. I killed them all. The children. They're like I killed them like they're like animals. I hate them. How Padme could possibly love him after that, I have no idea.
Right.
But
I paused the movie when we were watching it at that point, and I was like, she still fucked this man.
Yeah. But well, I mean, this is an incredibly sexless world. Maybe it was IVF. We don't know. The force impregnation. That sounds super creepy, actually.
In vitro fossilization.
But just going back to that, even putting aside the Padme part of it, I do think that that's a brilliant way of showing the fall, because what we've established from the first couple movies is, and this is what I keep wanting to talk to Matt Carroll about from the other podcasts, because to me, this is the ethical heart and soul of the movies. It's the idea of that if you hate people for the very best of reasons, that you will stop seeing their humanity or their whatever the word, their sentienceness, whatever it is. You know, you'll stop seeing them as individuals, and you eventually get to a point where you're just like, all of them are awful. They're not even real people. They're animals. I can kill them all, the women and children included. And that's the path to the dark side, literally, is like that righteous anger, very legitimate anger and hate can lead you into some terrible places. My own opinion on that has shifted, and I've become more like, I think sometimes righteous anger and hate is a good thing, but I do still think that's possible. And I loved that they showed it in that. Again, I wish it had been more subtle. I wish that the scenes with his family made any sense at all, because when we get to New Hope, the way that Uncle Owen talks about Anakin makes no sense given how little contact they have in this movie. but I did at least really like that scene, because I thought it was a nice way of establishing, like, here's what we mean about how his attachment to others, he's so attached to his mother that his anger about her death and his fear about her death and his hatred about her death leads him down this dark path.
Yeah. God, there's so many things that could have been better in this movie with a better writing team. And not to say that, I know that I've said specifically the words George Lucas is no longer a visionary. I'm not saying that he hasn't created a great world here, but that was, 30 years prior to this film. Like, it may be time to get some other opinions on what might fit into it, and not just the one other craptastic writer that you got on this guy.
I think he definitely, we talked about this for the last movie, but he fits now into that world of, I'm too big to be edited. And no one can tell me I'm wrong. And I think these movies really suffer for it, as well as and again, this is all Hollywood insider stuff and gossip, but I've heard it confirmed from a number of different sources that makes me think that there's some really legitimacy to this. That, he always had a real kind of, I'm right, Hollywood is wrong thing. There was some stupid rule that Hollywood had about where the credits go in the movies, and he was like, screw that, I'm doing it my own way, and I kind of respect him for that. But he always was like, I want nothing to do with the way Hollywood says it should be done. And that when Phantom Menace was so criticized, instead of having a moment of like what I really hoped he was going to do, of saying like, okay, well maybe I was a little off the mark there. Let me kind of go back to the original movies, figure out what was really great about them, talk to some others. My understanding is that he just doubled down, and he was like, it still made lots of money. You people are all wrong. I'm right. I know what I'm doing. I'm not listening to anyone, and fuck you. I'm going to make just as much of a kid's movie as I did last time. And that's why you have Jar Jar Binks declaring the fate of the entire Republic.
Just God. Just the best one. The best person for it. And that was like a stick in the eye. He was just like, oh yeah, you didn't like Jar Jar? Well, he's bringing down the whole Republic. You're welcome. Say something again. Say something else. I dare you.
I want to know who hurt the political system of Naboo. Because not only do they, first of all, they elect queens, which I don't quite understand.
Yeah.
But sure.
I thought that kings and queens were not elected. I mean, they thought they did in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, but like that's about it.
No, she clearly says like I wasn't even the youngest queen when I was elected.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
like,
yo, you're just saying like that's not how it's supposed to work.
That's not how monarchy works.
Yeah, and on Naboo, they seem to think mostly that children should be their politicians, or at least because they have very young queens and that other younger senators. Fine, and then the Gungans think that Jar Jar makes a good senator. None of it makes any sense. Let's talk though about the one other kind of big plot point here, the clone army. What's your take on the way the clone army, we find out that it's being created and the plot there, and then how Yoda winds up being the one to be like, cool, we got to get an army, let's go fight.
Yoda was like, I'm going to go check this out and see what's going on here and see if I can't figure it out. And then he shows up later like, yo, boys, ride or die, what up? Like, we got a clone army, let's go.
Yeah. Yoda, ride or die, I like it.
I like it. It was such a weird twist to have that happen. And again, this could have been a separate movie about, is the... Okay. Yeah. Is the process of cloning an army ethical? Is it right? Does the Republic care about that sort of thing? Does that fit in the canon anywhere? We already know that slavery is abolished and gone in pretty much all of the Central planets, but like does Kamino care about that? Is it okay for them to step out to Kamino to get a clone army? I don't know. They don't establish it. They don't even talk about it.
Yeah.
They're just like, hey, this old master that died 10 years ago has put in an order for these clones. And they're like, huh, well, that's neat. We'll use them because we're not going to let it go to waste. You've got 10 years worth of clones built up here and there's a lot of them.
Why?
And then And then there's that whole interchange or exchange between Obi-Wan and the Camino guy, with him saying, like, if you want more, like, if you want to put in another order, like, we need to know now because it takes a while to grow these. Like, it's going to take some time to grow more. And, like, is that okay? Like, this was coming out in a time in America or the world's history where, like, cloning was becoming a thing, like an actual thing in the world, and a lot of ethical debate was going on about it. And damn if they didn't just completely ignore that.
Everything about this should be making people suspicious. You know, clearly this Jedi was not acting on the advice of the council. He was lying to people. There was something clearly nefarious going on. Obi-Wan tells the Jedi Council that, so the Jedi Council knows this. They also know that a person who's deeply involved with the making of this army is directly connected to the Separatists, this guy Jango Fett. Like, they're actually fighting him right then and there. And so the idea, like, I get, for me, if you want to tell me a story about about smart people being manipulated, you have to make me believe that it's possible the smart people would fall for the plan. To me, it is so blindingly, and I get it if there's stuff that we see that the characters don't see. But just going by what Yoda and Obi-Wan and Mace and the rest of the council sees, it should be so blindingly obvious that this is a setup in some way. That the fact that Yoda was willing to ride in with the clone army, I just found it so disappointing. Because I was like, that doesn't make any sense. This is so clearly not what's supposed to be happening. This is so clearly exactly what they want you to do.
Yep. And part of the problem, you said I'm okay with maybe Yoda and Obi-Wan don't see some stuff. If we have knowledge, they don't. That's the thing, though. These are Jedi. They are one with the Force. They hear the voices of past Force or past Jedi speaking to them through the Force. They gain knowledge that should not have been gained otherwise through the Force. They are very insightful, and they are wizards. Like, they should know everything. They should not be, they shouldn't be outsmarted by somebody who just puts, like, some machinations into play in these incredibly unsubtle ways. In this, like, it would have to be several layers deep, and this guy convincing this guy to do that thing, which convinces that guy to do that thing, to convince that guy to do that thing, to convince that guy to do that thing, and now I have the power. Like, it's a way. It shouldn't be like, I want to put this order in to make that happen, to make you guys do the thing, and I got the power.
It's a way you could have done this? What if it was Dooku who went to Kaminoya? What if it was...
to check the order?
Yeah, no, what if it was Dooku who was suspicious about the Republic and was starting to move towards the Separatists, and so he went to discover the clones, and he realized that it was all this plot, and that was kind of his final straw of, like, the Republic is lost and done and completely under the control of a Sith. That's why we're breaking away. Because now what happens is we get more of Dooku's motivations. We, the audience, get to learn that the clones are clearly supposed to be 100% a Sith machination. But Yoda and Obi-Wan have no idea. And so if you find some other way for them to find out, then it makes a lot more sense for them to be like, well, I don't really love that this army exists, but YOLO, let's go fight. Like, it's still kind of dumb of them, but wouldn't that at least make so much more sense?
Well, okay. How about this? Let's take that a little farther and say, what if Dooku was part of the Order? He went to check it out, and he finds this clone army. He reports back to Yoda, and says, "There's this clone army. This is a bad idea. I don't agree with it. We should destroy it." And Yoda's like, "Nah, let's embrace it." And Dooku's like, "I'm sorry, you said what now?"
Yeah.
And then Yoda comes in, ride or die clones, what up? And then Dooku takes that as like, this is the last straw. The Jedi Council has fallen apart. They've gone far astray or far afield of what is right. I'm leaving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would have worked so much more better. Like,
and then his fight with Yoda at the end could have been him leaving the Order.
Yeah. And I mean, even to you know where we probably needed that? Episode 1.
Maybe.
I mean, it could happen here too, but yeah, it just.
Well, yeah, him leaving the Order here could have. I mean, even if you want to condense it to 3 movies like what we got, you know, we could have Dooku established in the Council in Episode 1, and have him be the dissenting voice. You know, the one that speaks out like, maybe this isn't right. And, you know, maybe he's the one that speaks up in favor of the one on the council that speaks up in favor of training Anakin.
Yeah.
And Qui-Gon's like, no, I'm going to go with Dooku because that's a cool idea. Training people who are too old. That's a great idea. And then Dooku, you know, time jump. We've got Dooku 10 years later where he's just like, damn it, I'm fed up with this. I'm out. At the end of this movie, he leaves. And he leaves the Order, but he's been the one that's been talking to Anakin on the council, and Anakin has really been confiding in him, not Palpatine.
Yes.
Anakin has been confiding in him, not Palpatine. And then Dooku leaves, and Anakin's like, you know what? Maybe he's got a good idea.
Yeah, that would have made so much more sense, you know. And then we get this great conflict between Obi-Wan and Dooku, you know, about the two of them kind of going back and forth, especially because like, because Dooku was trained. Did Dooku train a Sifo Dyas, or was it the other way around? I feel like there's some connection there. No,
Sifo Dyas was not. He was a name. He was not in any
right.
anything.
Yoda trained Dooku, and Dooku trained Qui-Gon.
Correct.
So we have this whole chain. So yeah, like. Then a conflict between Dooku and Obi-Wan, especially as like Obi-Wan is trying to, oh my God, think about it this way.
Could have been so good.
Because Qui-Gon said to Obi-Wan, you have to train Anakin for me, right? So that's why Obi-Wan's doing this for the memory of Qui-Gon. Now Qui-Gon's master, the one who trained Qui-Gon, Dooku, is giving him advice about how to train Anakin. And Obi-Wan, of course, at first would be like, this is the dude who trained Qui-Gon. He would know. And then he's starting to doubt that, and he's starting to question that. What great tension would that be?
That would be so good. Such great tension. And then that would make a great 3-way fight in the 3rd movie.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there.
I feel like I steered this episode into being a Movie Medics episode.
No, trust me. We both had our hands on that particular tiller. Yeah, I'm with you all there. And like I said, get me on Movie Medics. I think it's going to be a great podcast. But let's pull it back to some more other things. So I think we've gone through most of the arcs. What are the best and worst moments? And let's challenge ourselves. What are the best moments of this movie for you?
I think the best moment is all of the Jedi coming out of the woodwork in the Geonosian Coliseum.
Yeah.
You know, even if that was not a great, like, what's the word? Not a great representation of other cultures, we'll say. That was a really cool scene with them, all of the lightsabers in the Coliseum. Like, we hadn't seen that sort of thing in these movies at all before this.
We've never seen, like, more than 2 Jedi on screen at the same time working together. Right.
So having them, like, even if it wasn't great choreography and they were all just kind of standing there waving their sticks around, like, it was so cool to see so many Jedi all in the same place like that. And, you know, everybody has their own specialties and their own powers, and Kit Fisto's doing his thing, and Mace Windu's doing his thing, Ki-Adi-Mundi's doing his thing. Like, everybody's all over the place, and it was so cool. And Aayla Secura had her own style. Like, this could have also been a great, like, as much as I like it, I also am like, it could have been good. It could have been even better if we had known about the different forms of saber combat.
Best. We're just talking about the best moments.
Sorry.
No, but I agree with you. I like that scene a lot, especially because it's the first time we see a Jedi die who doesn't want to die. Or die in combat, I mean. Like, Obi-Wan dies because, he decides to let Vader strike him down so he'll become stronger than ever. But other than that, like, Yoda dies of old age, Luke never dies, and pretty much seems invulnerable to anything except another lightsaber user. Like, Vader's the only one who ever has him in any actual real danger. And so to see that, yes, like, enough droids, enough Geonosians, like, the numbers will eventually get you. Jedi die in this battle. Jango Fett kills a Jedi because, as we establish in other parts of the canon, Mandalorians have been learning to fight Jedi for generations, and they're good at it. Like, I love that because it also, to me, it helps set up what we're going to see in the next movie. Because if you make Jedi, like, especially in movie 1, I think you talked about this, Phantom Menace, they just are, it is so easy for them to just mow down thousands of droids without a second thought, that the idea that they could be wiped out eventually in, by the Empire turning on them doesn't make sense. And so establishing that, yes, Jedi can die, that it's really hard to kill them, but they can be killed, to me, that's really important. I think that's definitely a good moment for that.
And that's actually the first point in this movie where there's any sort of tension at all, because everything that's happened up until then has just been like super green screen, like the characters are just dancing around, and like the sequence in the factory was like,
oh god,
okay,
so bad.
Yeah, right. Like, it was so terrible because all of it is super CGI. You can tell that, like, they're not being directed well on where things are. There's no tension. There's no, like, nobody looks like they're scared of what's going on. They just look like they're, like, analyzing it and they're going to get out of it. It's fine. But it feels like there's no stakes. There's no tension toward it. And then finally in the Geonosian Coliseum, Jedi are dying. So there's actually, like, you feel the weight setting in. You feel that tension mounting as the droid army is building up around them before Yoda comes in like Gandalf.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, here's something we talked about from the first movie that carries over here. You can do two different things. You can have a parody of a fight scene in which a droid is doing silly, ridiculous things, or you can have an actual fight scene that seems to have consequences and concerns and where we believe that bad things can happen. It's very hard to do both. And the whole scene in the, like in some ways, like, that scene in the droid factory, like, the visual of it is fantastic. And, like, I do canning, you like can like strawberry jam and stuff like that. And part of it is like, you dip a Bell's bottle in, a glass jar in boiling water. You fill it up with boiling water and then use these tongs to lift it up and pour it out. And I've been doing that for 10 years. And every time I do, I think about that scene on Geonosis with, like, the big pots of lava being dumped out, because it was an iconic moment. It was great. Yep. And that scene is so taken away by the ridiculousness of C-3PO getting, his head and a droid's body mixed up. And even that scene with the lightsabers, which is so good, is made so much worse because of, again, the pratfalls of C-3PO and the droids. And it's just... every good moment in this movie, I feel like, could have been so much better if they hadn't done something dumb.
It's like they undermined themselves at every good turn.
Yeah. For me, though, I think that's definitely one of my favorite moments. I think the fight scene on not the fight scene, the confrontation, as I said, between Obi-Wan and Dooku also is just really one of my favorites. And the little bits of acknowledgement of when they're discussing, like, do we want to have this clone army? And you said before, like, there's so many great ethical issues to discuss. I don't mean to keep pushing it, but a big part of why I love the Clone Wars so much is that a fundamental part of that story is what is the moral value of the clones? And should we be using them? Is it ethical to be using them? And that one of the themes that's really explored, this is an overall plot spoiler for the show, so skip ahead 30 seconds if you're planning to view it and don't want it. Though it's not even a plot point, it's just kind of a theme that's developed, but if you want, skip ahead 30 seconds. But is the idea that the Jedi having to become generals and treating the clones like they are just pieces on a war map instead of actual living things is a huge part of their own fall. Because it is them, like, not recognizing the humanity of the people they're working with. It is brilliantly done in the TV show. And But again, it's so frustrating because that's in a TV show. And like, you couldn't at least bring those ethical issues in here. It says a lot that every time I try to bring up like the positives, I keep going back to negatives. But at least there's a positive there. So what are the worst parts of the movie?
I mean, I think we've spent an hour and a half talking about the worst parts of the movie.
Yeah, narrow it down to just one or two. What are the absolute worsts for you?
Man. I hit a real low point when Anakin delivered the kiss, because she had been saying no, don't, stop the whole time, and then he gives his I don't like sand, and then he's like, everything here is soft and smooth, and then touches her.
Yeah.
He strokes her like she's a pet.
Oh, it's so wrong. For me, that's definitely the worst. I hadn't even caught that part, but you're so right. And then the other thing is just, as I said, that moment where Dooku and Sidious come back to show that they're working together. I almost walked out of the theater because I was so mad about that.
I mean, that was the end of the movie, so you'd been okay.
So we talked a lot about this, but let's again kind of just focus on our outline and finishing this up. One of our promises is that we won't ever have an episode that goes longer than the thing we're talking about.
Yep.
And this episode, I think, is already longer than we want it to be. We're going to try and keep these mostly around an hour and 20 minutes. But you know what? The movie is so long, we still have lots of time to go. We're not going to go that far, I promise. But in terms of how did this fit into the overall story of the 6 movies, the 9 movies? First, in terms of world building, what do you think this did in terms of world building for us?
It had a lot of potential for world building. It had a lot of potential for establishing not just world, but like the ethics of the Republic. Mm-hmm. Like in the first movie, in episode 1, we get the Republic. Holy crap, that's the thing. And then we have to discover why the Republic exists, what the Republic feels like is the best thing. Establish its political leanings. It's there's so many things. There's so many things about the Republic as a character that need to be discovered and felt out, and that just didn't happen in this movie. And this is where it should have happened.
Yeah.
And the whole the issue of like the Jedi are not infallible with their archives. The Jedi have archives? First off, whoa.
That's kind of cool.
Holy crap. That's a crazy thing, right? And the lady saying if it doesn't exist in our archive, it doesn't exist. Like, okay, way to be real arrogant about your archives, but all right. Like, you've discovered everything. Look at you.
Right.
And having like people able to hack in and remove items from that archive, remove information, remove planets, star systems. Like that's a big implication.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot that could be going on there. And it's just never addressed.
And I will say, I actually thought those parts were a lot better than you did. And I'm going to say, one of the things with headcanon is it's hard to remember like what's happening specifically in this movie. And part of, I think, watching the TV show The Clone Wars has made me like both this movie and the third movie so much more, because I feel like it does fill in those gaps. And so I watch this and I feel like the gaps aren't as big of a problem. And maybe that's because I'm seeing things better, or maybe it's because I'm just filling in the gaps from something outside of the movie, and that's not okay. The movie needs to do it itself.
Right.
But I will say, like, every other time I'd watch this movie, I always got mad at that scene, in part because like the kids figure it out for him, but it seems really incredibly obvious. Like, if all the gravity is saying that there's a planet there, then there's probably a planet there. And I thought it was a very dumb scene. This time, I actually thought it was actually really well done and very subtle, and maybe actually goes in more of my best moments, because I thought the point was that, the point of this is that of course Obi-Wan should see that it's possible the records could be wrong. Of course the librarian should see that. Of course they should all see that maybe Dooku and Sifo Dyas could be really that evil. But that they're so locked in the hubris of the Jedi that they don't see it. And that only a child who hasn't been fully indoctrinated in that yet is able to see the incredibly obvious truth that everyone else is missing.
It would have been great to have that sort of discussion on how dangerous indoctrination is,
right?
While maybe one of our main characters is growing up.
Yeah, that could have been a good point. Well, especially because Yoda is the one. Both Yoda and Obi-Wan are like, "Wow, the kid pointed that out," but they never then have a moment of like, "We should start questioning our hubris." Like it's a great lesson, but it never lands.
Yeah,
but I did think they did a lot between that and the other assumptions of really helping you get the hubris of the Jedi. I liked some of the world building. I hated the diner scene. I thought it just felt like it's a fun idea to like build this idea of a criminal underworld in Coruscant, but I think again that would need that would need a whole other movie to establish.
Yeah, that's a different movie with different set of main characters.
Because
that is so far beneath Jedi, it is unreal.
But like for a Mandalorian type show, how good would that have been? Right?
Oh man.
Like and like there's a character from the Clone Wars who winds up like going and like striking out on her own and spending some time on with the criminal underworld. That character should have gotten their own show and like had a fantastic arc, There's so much good that could have happened. Because again, what like this diner guy, what if he was like, a former, a partner of the Mandalorians, or he worked for the cloners. Like he's got some kind of dark past, but we don't know that. And so it doesn't make any sense why he's just, I'm the jovial guy who makes burgers and knows everything.
And why the hell does Obi-Wan know him?
Yeah.
Like how many degrees of Kevin Bacon is Obi-Wan away from like criminal underworld?
Yeah. And just about Obi-Wan and Criminal Underworld, and we are going to start wrapping up soon, I very well promise, but I want to kind of make this one point. Let me ask you this, because you, like me, believe in justice. You like me, have some really good thoughts.
Nah.
And, well, I'm sure that you, like me, think that drug addiction is kind of a problem in our world.
Yeah.
If I told you that there was a way to go up to a drug addict, and without any consent on their part, without them once saying, I don't want to be a drug addict, mind control them, and brainwash them so that they decided to no longer be a drug addict. And the government just started doing this without any, like, thought about, like, how do we feel about, white brainwashing people to make them not do a thing that we think is not good for society?
Man,
what's your take on that kind of a world?
If you don't want to buy some death sticks, just say so.
Yeah. Like, if something of death, like... because to me, like, if someone is now saying, like, well, but addiction's terrible, we should do everything we can to fix addiction, sure. And if, like, the Jedi set up a thing where they're like, hey, are you an addict? Do you need help? Like, come here. We will brainwash you so you're no longer an addict. Or even the criminal justice system was like, look, you got arrested for doing dumb things about death sticks. You either have to go to jail, or you have to go to the Jedi for this, or you have to do something else. But it's still a choice. I am all for it. But...
What if it's a Jedi healing spot where they say that it's healing, but really it's just brainwashing?
Well, because here's the thing. Once you say that the people in power get to brainwash people who have ideas and do things that are thought to be contrary to the society, oh my lord, is that a slippery slope to some real bad places. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, Anakin specifically talked about that. He was like, I don't think that the government system works. And she's like, well, how would you do it? And he's like, I'd sit everybody down around a table and talk about things until we agree on the best course of action and then do it.
My God.
And she's like, but that's what we do. And he's like, I don't know. And she's like, but, not everybody agrees on what's best. And he's like, maybe we should force them to agree. And she's like, Anakin, that's tyranny. Yeah. Like, what the hell are you talking about?
And every time, what I think about is that every time I hear someone who's just like, oh, both sides are terrible. It's all the politicians' fault. We just need to get real people into Congress and they'll take care of everything. Like, no, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Yeah. So it was just a tiny little thing. And again, it's the kind of thing where I made this point before, but I think it's something I bring up a lot of the time. When I see a character doing something that I interpret as I'm supposed to learn that this is why the character is bad, it's important to me that I know that the writer knows that too. And I watch that scene and I feel like if that scene is meant to show us that the Jedi are brainwashing people because, again, their hubris has gotten away from them and they think that's a way to solve society's problems, sure, I'm there for it. But the writer has to give us something about that. Otherwise, I have no idea if George Lucas thinks, yeah, would this be a cool way to stop smoking?
Oh, man. When I kicked on Disney Plus and it said scenes of or depictions of tobacco use, I was like, the hell? What? What? I didn't remember that. And then I look at my wife and she's like, oh yeah, I mean, I think it's pipes, if I remember. I think they have pipes. And I was like, I don't think so. It seems like a Jedi thing to do, to sit around smoking as in the council or whatever, like big long pipe to show how much of a wizard you are. But then it gets to that scene and the guy's like, you want to buy some death sticks? And I was like, there it is. There's the tobacco depiction.
Yeah.
And that scene could have, oh man. So, okay. So you're talking about how it's incredibly unethical for Obi-Wan to be like, you want to go home and rethink your life. What if he had stopped at, you don't want to sell me death sticks? And the guy's like, I don't want to sell you death sticks, and goes to walk away. Like, is that okay?
Where he's just saying it, but it's not mind control?
Well, no. Like if he does the Jedi mind trick and says, you don't want to sell me death sticks, like basically go away. Mm-hmm. Like, not go home and rethink your life. But just reestablish who you are as a person.
Just, I don't want you to do it to me.
Yeah, just go away from me.
I would kind of see that as, like, this is something I kind of see a lot in, like, let me start that again. There are times in superhero movies where I see someone like Jessica Jones or others, like, use their superhero powers to get people to stop bothering them. And
right.
I think it's kind of like a lovable quirk where I'm like, that's not really the best thing you should be doing. But yeah, I admit if I had that power, I'd probably do it too. Like, imagine if it was like a Jedi woman at a bar and just she was getting like 10 different people coming up and hitting on her. And so she was doing that to be like, you don't find me attractive. You don't want to hit on it. Or even like, you don't want to hit on women in this bar. I'd be so down with that. I'd be like, you go, girl.
What if Ayla Secura has a reputation as the least attractive Jedi ever, but she's like beautiful. And it's only that she has like Jedi mind tricked people into thinking that she's not attractive over and over again.
That'd be awesome. But yeah, so I think to answer your question, I think, yeah, I'd be fine with that. I'd find it as kind of like a, yeah, you're a little bit of a scamp, Obi-Wan, but I'd do the same thing too. That's kind of annoying. Go for it.
Okay. So what if he was accompanied by a different Jedi who, after he said that, did the mind trick of, you want to go home and rethink your life? And then Obi-Wan turns to him and goes, dude, what are you doing? We can't do that.
Yeah. Well, So he'd have to be accompanied by another Jedi who also thinks that there should be no limits on the Jedi's power to stop and make things better if they think it's better. Who was a Jedi? Like, yeah, it could have been Anakin. Anakin
could have been Anakin.
Could have seen that happen and done that, and Obi-Wan could have been like, "No, dude, we don't do that. We help people. We don't control them."
Right.
Yeah, that would have been so much better.
Right.
But yeah, so the world building, and then I think honestly, it's where world building is where this movie really falls, because they had the chance to tell us why the Separatists wanted to break away. They didn't really. They sort of did, as you said, an hour and a half into the movie. They had a chance to tell us why the Republic worries that the Separatists want to break away. They never tell us. They never, like, even like, if you'd had a moment, in some ways I feel like Amidala could have been such a great character to explore this with, because she obviously is very against the Republic. But what if she had said something like, Anakin was like, well, why don't you just let them leave then? And she said, look, all these people want to leave because they just want to like have rampant, they want to be Ferengi basically, and they just want to completely like steal every bit of money they can from their own people. And so we don't want to let them leave for that reason, or because like they want to leave so that we won't stop them from economically oppressing our own people. And that's going to be the problem. Like, Padme could have been a great character to be like, here's why the Separatists leaving is a problem, but here's also why we shouldn't be building this army of the Republic. There's none of that. And then, by the way, when the army of the Republic shows up, that Padme was the one who really wanted to vote against, does she say a word about why this is bad? No, she's just like, yay, clones, let's go fight.
Yep.
So yeah, I think the world building is really where it kind of falls down.
And yeah, it's funny. The name of the movie is Attack of the Clones. Clones don't show up the clones don't show up fighting until the last half hour of the movie.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. So the movie's called Attack of the Clones. And until now, all we'd really known was that Luke's father had died in the Clone Wars. And the Clone Wars were talked about as this terrible thing. Did you go into this movie thinking the clones were going to be on the side of the good guys?
No. If it was, it's Attack of the Clones. Like, why would I think that the clones are good guys?
Yeah. Like, the headcanon that I had built as, an 8-year-old watching that movie was that, like, long ago, some terrible people, maybe the Sith, had created clones and used those clones, and it was like one of the worst fights the Jedi ever had, and that Anakin had been killed as part of that. And obviously we learned later that Anakin turned to the dark side, but that the Clone Wars was about the good guys fighting the clones. And certainly there was a lot of the pre-canon that established that. The Timothy Zahn books, certainly they talked about the clones being a thing that the Empire used and a thing that, like, bad people used, and it was terrible. And so to just have it be like the clones are the good guys, it just, again, it made no sense to me. It didn't fit.
Yeah. Well, to make... Oh, you want to build the tension around the clones a little bit?
Yeah.
What if instead of a changeling, it was a clone who was the one sent to kill Amidala? Like, what if Django had been plucking out specific clones out of the facility and bringing them across to different places and using them as like assassin fodder?
Yeah, his own little death squad.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could have been great. Also, we could have gotten a little bit more about what Mandalorians are about, like, because that could have been really more interesting. Yeah, there's so much. Anyway, I think we're starting to get to wrapping up. I want to read one bit of feedback we got.
Okay.
Because this is a different perspective I think we're talking about. A fan named Jennifer wrote in. So, I know I'm out on an island here, but I have a fondness for this movie. I saw it when I was 8, and at that age, I thought it was very romantic, in that silly Disney way that makes me grown now, but that as a little kid I loved, and I still love rewatching. The plot doesn't make any sense, but I found the cloners so damn creepy, and I loved all the Obi-Wan versus the bounty hunter scenes. I look forward to hearing you guys cast on it, and I'm sure I'll agree with most of your bashing of it, but just know someone still likes it. Love the cast. Thanks for keeping me entertained in quarantine. Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah.
It's very kind words.
Yeah, I appreciate the words, and I am glad to know that some people still have that fondness for it. And I think it's true. I think the cloner scenes were pretty damn creepy and would have probably been even more so to a kid. And the Jango Boba Fett scenes I can get. And I definitely, I didn't grow up watching Disney movies because I had I grew up in the 70s and 80s and I had a fairly gendered childhood and was told like that was for girls, and I think that's kind of dumb now. But so I didn't get raised on that idea of like, that romance is a thing I was supposed to be pining after as a young kid. But I guess I can understand that, like, as an 8-year-old, maybe I hate sand and you're so smooth. Like that could sound like a romantic line. I'm stretching, Jennifer, I admit. But I want to acknowledge that your feelings are real and awesome. And if other listeners feel the same, I think please write in, because I think that's I think you helped me, Jeff, and other people have said this too, when you said that, like, when you watch Attack of the Clones, you ate it up, because you were the target demographic. It was only when you were later that you were like, wait, this was a terrible movie.
Oh yeah, when the Phantom Menace came out, I was firmly in that demographic. Hell, when this movie came out and the scene with the cloners happened, like Obi-Wan went to the cloners, at the time I remember feeling that like these guys were mystical, magical, they're beyond the Jedi's understanding. Maybe they wiped the records to hide their own existence. And like, they're so shiny and everything is really pristine here. Like, man, these guys are cool.
Yeah.
And then now watching it again, I'm like, man, this place is really creeping me out. Like, I didn't feel that building sense of dread, of terror that whole facility puts in me now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's good to know. And I think that, because I admit, I watched all these as an adult, and I watched these as an adult who had huge hopes and felt them get dashed, and so I was very cynical and very bitter. And because of that, it's hard for me to imagine that anyone liked these movies. And so, if you're one of the fans who saw these movies when you were younger, or even when you're older, I mean, my friend Adam, who was my age, he was a high school friend of mine. We didn't go to the same high school, but we hung out together. He loved this movie. And so I think it's good for us to remember that, like, we can get super critical, but, like, these movies entertain a lot of people, and that's important too. And we're giving you our opinions. It's not like the definitive, we are right and you are wrong. And I really want to stay away from any kind of, like, that kind of
this is
toxic,
the way.
yeah, no, none of that. Toxic fan bashing. We have strong opinions, but if you disagree, that's the feedback we love. Like, write in and tell us if you think we're great, because our egos can always use stroking. But frankly, this especially, if you think we're getting something wrong, if we get something wrong about the dartsaber, write in and let us know. So, Jennifer, thank you so much. And thank you to all the fans. And again, if you wrote in about the Clone Wars, I'm going to read all of those emails on the next episode about the Clone Wars, which will go up hopefully next week, although we're having some technical difficulties at the moment with schedules and stuff. But hopefully that'll go up soon. So, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you to all the fans. Jeff, any kind of last closing words you want to talk about? One last thing you didn't get to mention?
Nah. I feel like I've laid it all out. I mean, we've been here for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. There's a couple of little things I could touch on, but let's wrap up. So, fans, thank you again so much. Please write in and let us know what you think. We would love to hear your thoughts. You can find us at Star Wars Universe Podcast at gmail.com. You can also find us by searching for Star Wars Universe Podcast on either Facebook or Twitter. There's a couple other podcasts with very similar names because there's been Star Wars podcasts forever now. So
really?
Yeah, I know, shocking. So if you're looking for us,
Crazy.
Make sure you look for the icon that has the red Jedi Republic symbol with crossed microphones looking like crossed lightsabers. And thank you very much to Calissa Fitzgerald, who is the one who designed that for us. It's a great icon, and I love it. And we really got some great artistic help with that. So thank you to her. Thank you to all the fans. Thank you to you, Jeff. And everybody, have a great day.
I've spoken.
Yes, you have.